Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Phil Brown here, or as some of you know me, Fusion Phil over here at jitcadcam, and we are back with another Fusion for Beginners video. Now, some of you may or may not be beginners of Fusion 360, and that's all right. As you're going to notice in these videos, there's a lot of different things that most of you will pick up on, or tips and tricks that you have yet to see and wondered how they're done. From that, I am over here at an employee as of jitcadcam. I'm also the president, nonetheless owner. So if you guys have any questions about this stream or anything outside of Fusion 360, feel free to reach out to me directly. You have my email and my contact info down below as well. We've also started a Discord channel. You're more than welcome to join and message me and live chat with me there. So for any of you out there in the chat, if you're hearing this, if you guys have any questions at time, keep in mind there is about a 30-second delay. And as soon as that delay comes through and I see those actual chats come in and questions, I'm happy to jump on and answer those as soon as possible. So let's kick this off. The way I'm going to kick this off is if you haven't caught any of the video content so far, we're going to walk through a few things. And I'm going to start by giving you guys my personal opinion on some of the stuff and basic settings inside of Fusion I change right out of the box. So let's get changed over here to my screen share. The very first one, this one always kills me, and I think a lot of you are always curious if you've seen some of my other content. I do not like this white background. And Autodesk, if you watch this video, guys, anytime you want to release a dark theme for Fusion 360, I believe it's a highly requested item, and we all want it at the end of the day. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change some of my visuals here. Now, what are my visuals? This is everything from how we're going to see parts. Again, the environment in this case, I like River Rubicon, even how your camera and how your perspective of your parts are. So let's go ahead and kick on River Rubicon. And with that, you're going to notice I now have this lovely dark display, and it obviously brings out my beautiful tan up here in North Dakota much better. But we're going to also switch gears, and we're going to change some of our preferences, right? So it looks like we actually got our first message in, hybrid machining. Once again, I think you're on a hat trick. This makes 3 days in a row that you're in my live stream. However, you did miss my live stream earlier where I did a little CAD for CAM tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and go up to this user in the top right. I'm going to go down to my preferences. Now, again, new to Fusion, maybe you didn't catch those other videos. You want to jump in here and immediately machine a part, that's fine. However, this is where I suggest some basic changes no matter who you are as a user. First and foremost, how you pan, orbit, and zoom within inside of Fusion. If you're coming from another software, we're going to go ahead and change that to something I prefer a little bit more, which is SolidWorks. Now, we can reverse our zoom here as well. I'm going to switch over, and again, if you are a CAM person, we could always start my Fusion in CAM versus starting in design. Let's go ahead and apply these changes. I'm going to jump down here to where the manufacturer section is. This is another big one that I think a lot of people miss. I don't even know why these are options. Personally, they should all be on by default. We're going to go ahead and enable our cloud library. We're going to set our tools. And I just tell everybody, go ahead and check all of these boxes right off the start, right? Now, from a units side of things, if you want to change your default from millimeters to inches, we could also do that right here. So now we've set everything up from a user profile and default settings. What I'm going to do now is I am going to open a part. Now, for most of you, I think a lot of people are familiar with the traditional workflow of file open. Now, I don't recommend the file open strategy. I much more recommend opening your data panel and using the upload button. Now, what you're going to notice is I have the ability to go select a file, whatever I'm going to pull from my desktop or my parts, and I can upload those automatically into Fusion. Now, by uploading them, what is going to happen is it's actually going to translate these and change them into a Fusion file from their original file format, and it's going to do it in the background on some idle processors. So if you're working on a bunch of stuff, we can upload, 20 parts in one shot. Those 20 parts will come into Fusion, and they'll run in the background while we can still continue to work. If you've used other softwares in the past, the screen gets all white, and it just sits there and thinks until that file is open. So I'm going to, for the sake of this actual video, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go down to our CAM samples, and I'm going to pull in a pretty generic part because, again, we're going to walk through the basics at a high level. If you guys want me to dive deeper on any of this stuff, please let me know with the comments down below. I'm happy to build much more in-depth files or much more in-depth toolpaths, or maybe you haven't checked out some of my other content. So what I'm going to do is I have this file open. We do need to do a save as here because this is one of the default files. I'm going to go ahead and throw this into a new folder. And that new folder is, we're going to go ahead and say this is the manufacturer workspace. And let's just go ahead and place that file in there. So switching gears from the design side to the manufacturer side, I can now close out my data panel also. And as you can see, I now have the ability to start with the basics of the CAM side of Fusion. Now I say CAM, understandably, if you're 3D printing or doing something else, you may refer to it as something other than CAM, but we are going to do CAM today. And how we do that is I like to break this down into 3 things, right? So first, your setup. Second is your toolpaths. And the third item is going to be post-processing. Now, for setup, as you can see in Fusion, and I've talked about this before, everything you do tends to be a left to right, top to bottom workflow. So if I go ahead and start with this first section, as you're seeing, the very first thing it wants me to do is a setup. Same with things like creating patterns and additional stuff as we may be doing inside of Fusion. But the very first thing is that setup button. Now, as you can see, my setup window has popped out. The setup window as a whole is very straightforward to walk through. The one thing that I used to not recommend, but now I'm a huge fan of it, is defining your machine. Now, we're not going to define a machine today. You could go out and pick a machine. Let's keep this very simple so that most of you that are maybe buying an old Fidel machine and put it in your garage, you can just see the basics of the steps, and then we can build off those basic steps into more advanced things. So what are we doing? Well, we could either be doing turning, mill turn. You have that cutting, additive 3D printing. This is a milling part. We're going to mill it on probably a 3-axis mill, right? Now, your WCS system, for those of you that don't know, I apologize if any of you just heard my daughter scream in the background, this is where we're going to set our work offset, right? So this is our G54 or your E1s, or depending on how your machine defines that, but we need to tell the machine and the software the same point of reference, right? So by default, I did lock out. And in my other videos, I talk about I don't care about the world coordinates. And you guys will see why is because I'm actually going to do the back side of this part for this demonstration. And we're actually going to swap out from our orientation of model orientation into Z and X. Now, if you're somebody that might be doing something more in a mold industry, you might like X and Y. I'm sticking with the Z and X because it's pretty straightforward to do. As you can see, that Z axis is now up and my X axis is along my part. And I have that ability to flip that at any time. Again, I could just continue down, right? Top to bottom, left to right kind of workflow. Where do I want to put that origin, or where do I want to put that work offset? Nice thing is this is thinking in stock. So let's go ahead and throw that on maybe the back left corner. Maybe I have a probing system. We could stick with the top center. Again, this is able to be moved around, and this is all being moved by, we open this window up, a stock box point. You're going to see maybe in a second setup here, we're going to do a model box point as if we've already machined this part. Now, this part file has one model. One model is automatically referenced. We're not doing anything with jigs and fixtures. We can skip this at first, especially if you're doing some simple 3-axis stuff. We go ahead and jump into our next tab. Now, me personally, a lot of my stock either is square or circle, and it's usually a fixed size for the system, right? So as you can see here is by going to fixed size, we're auto rounding up. I'm also getting my model dimensions down here. Again, based on your parts and what you're doing, we could manually type this stuff in. I will make a slight adjustment here, which is going to be, let's say we're working with 1 3/4 inches. Now I want my part to sit just a hair below the top. So when we deck this off, right? So we're going to say offset from top. And as you're going to see by plugging in 20, I now have just enough material up here to skim. Lastly, we're going to jump out of our stock area, and this is our post-processing area. Again, for a lot of you, this is pretty straightforward. You can give it a program name. You can give it a comment, the number that it's going to reference when you spit this out in your controller. Also, your work offset's based on a single-digit integer unless selecting a machine, right? So work offset 0 and 1 is the default, which most machines is 54, 2 is 55, so forth and so on. For demonstration purposes, we're going to go ahead and jump back to my setup. I'm actually going to move my stock box point because it drives me a little mad with it being down there in the front. And that is the basics at a high level of your setup, right? What we've done there is we've done nothing more than jumped in. We've told it what kind of actual operations we're planning to do. We gave it our WCS, not only location, but directions. And then lastly, we threw some stock at it so that Fusion knows where is my material and where is my part, right? Now, from this, again, we're not going to spend a ton of time running through all these actual toolpaths, but as you can see, we could start with some simple stuff like 2D, and up at the top, we start with roughing. Maybe you're a little more traditional and you want to go ahead and face off this part. I'm going to go ahead and face off this part. And as you're going to be able to see is I can quickly go grab a tool from the Fusion library. First time opening the software, as you know, you're going to actually get a message. And if I force this, we're going to turn all of them off. You're going to get this libraries turned off message. Now, I didn't get this message because I have multiple licenses I've logged into on this computer. So it already knows this is stored on this desktop. Once we've turned on those libraries, we can again go through and filter based on, what kind of tool do I need? I'm going to go with a flat facing end mill. And in this case, this is my 2-inch face mill with default presets. Now, this is a key thing to remember that these are default tools, right? So if I wanted to make adjustments to my tools, I highly recommend copying them over to what you're working on. And then I can go in and I can edit this tool. Now, another thing you could do, as you guys see here, is I actually have a cloud library, which was one of those checkboxes from my preferences, as well as a local library. I would much rather you actually create things in your cloud, as you're seeing me do here, is let's go ahead and say new library, and I'm going to call this the old shop crib, which is where I can reference everything to. And then I could paste in that tool and again, make changes. Tools at the high level, very straightforward. What is the tool? What is the profile of tool? What is a shaft? Well, a shaft is maybe an extension or you're using an indexable tool, things of that nature. Your holder itself can actually be brought in by a lot of manufacturers' information. As you're seeing, this is a Cat 40 tool holder. It's nothing crazy. And then we have our cutting data and your post-processing information. Well, in the case of this tool, let's go ahead and edit that name. I'm just going to say this is 6061. And let's say we're running maybe a nice Haas VF2 SS. We're going to go ahead and give her 12,000 RPMs. My manufacturer actual feed rate might be somewhere closer to around 1 thou per tooth. And as you're seeing, this is automatically calculating my speeds and feeds on any fields with an FX. Now, again, the more you do this, the more you're going to get used to this. Now, on that machine, we can hold 31 tools. So I'm going to go ahead and place this in the 31 pocket. And from there, we can go ahead and accept. So this is where you start to see the power of Fusion. And this is where I say the most number one thing that I recommend to everybody. Because when I get support tickets at the end of the day, it absolutely makes me laugh. Because you're going to tell me that your toolpath doesn't work. I'm going to come in and, as you guys just saw me do, give it a tool and hit OK. And usually the toolpath is going to work. I don't know what happens. It's like your car at the mechanic. You take the car in and magically now it doesn't make that noise, right? This happens all the time when nobody blames anybody. Maybe I'm just a lucky guy in Fusion toolpaths. That said, is when you're working in Fusion and you do run into some major problems, a lot of times just starting over on that toolpath will fix that. So as you can see, and I'm just going to give you a general overview here. Again, our tool, we're not doing anything multi-axis, so we could actually skip this tab. Our next tab is based off our stock, which is automatic. That is why your setup is so important. I like to think of the geometry tab in this case as a containment in X and Y looking down on our part. Now on our heights tab, this can get a little confusing, but we always like to work bottom up. Seems to make more sense to everybody is how deep do we want to go or what is our bottom height? Well, it's the highest selected, which is our model top, right? We want to machine down to the model top. Where do I want to start from? Well, I want to start from my stock top, right? I don't want to smash this tool down and go. Again, our passes tab is aimed at, multiple step downs, multiple step overs. And then lastly is linking. For a lot of you, outside of maybe adding multiple depths or multiple step overs, as you may see me do here in a minute, there's not a lot here that you're going to change because Fusion is pretty safe and pretty predictive out of the box. Now, that's not to say if you go crash your machine, you're going to blame me on that because you still have to be cautious, right? Even after all my years in the software, I still always feed rate 25 and watch the first part. So let's throw another toolpath at this so we have some good stuff to work with. As you're seeing me do here again is I'm going to go ahead into my base library. Now, some of these tools do have quite a few speeds and feeds on them. And let's just grab an aluminum finishing. Oh, I don't want to copy the preset. We're going to go ahead and copy that tool. And we're going to jump up here into our shop crib. And again, I'm going to paste that tool, knowing that I need to change it. Now, because this tool is residing in my shop crib, anytime in the future that I need it, it's going to automatically be there for me to reference again later. So let's actually start out with maybe some aluminum roughing. Oh, looks like I did 2D contour. Lucked out because the stock size of my part are so close together. Again, as I've said to you guys, just hit OK a lot of times. If it's missing something, as you're seeing here, Fusion is great about telling you that it's missing something. So we hit yes. And in this case, we now get a lovely warning. And what it's telling me is one or more contours are missing. We have not selected a contour. So let's go ahead and open that toolpath back up. It's actually automatically jumped to the geometry tab. And now I can pick my contours. Now I see a lot of people make this mistake, and I'm going to show you the mistake, but I think you're going to understand after the fact. I want to machine around the outside of this part. So I pick the upper ring. Well, I picked that upper chain, and then I have to go to my heights tab, and I have to change my bottom height. Because if I don't do so, if you notice here, my toolpath goes around, but it's going around at the top of my stock. Now, some of you out there are also curious, the stock is in the way, I can't see what's going on. You have the ability to change that down here in this toolbar with your visibilities. We can actually say transparent. We could also toggle this with the F8 key, which I tend to do quite a bit in my videos. So now with that stock turned off, we may need to manually set our Z heights. Now this is big. I came from like Mastercam X4 way back in the day, where it was a 2D sketch and you would have to manually tell your tools how deep to go. Well, in Fusion's world, we can actually pick the lower chain on our part. We could also click that chain a second time to modify it, as in you're seeing me do down here at the bottom, is I want to stay on the total outside. And now if I hit OK, we are going down to the depth of that lowest point of that contour. Again, you have the ability to change this and edit as to you guys need. Another neat thing is because of all the new selections inside of Fusion, we could actually say a silhouette. And then I would like the tool to actually only outer loops, which means stay on the outside of my part. And as you're going to see here again, is I can hit that OK. And what it's automatically found is the silhouette of my part as well as that depth. Now, again, I understand some of you out there, we're going to flip this part over. We're going to machine the backside. Great. I may now want to give this an offset and drop that chain down about 50 thou. And when I hit OK, what you're going to notice is we're back up at the top, right? Well, that happened because of the silhouette, right? The silhouette of my part at the top plane. So again, sometimes you have a winning move, sometimes you have a losing move. I always tell people is if you're getting dangerous in the software, you're going to find things that you do a lot of and they're repetitive. So we can actually find better workflows, or again, we could always manually override heights, right? So again, as I can automatically select a face, 50 thou past that, we hit OK. And now, as you can see, I'm machining around the hat of that part, or the part where we're going to hold on to when we flip. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys to death with toolpaths. I'm going to show you another really kind of neat trick here is I'm going to go ahead and create a second setup as if we're going to flip this over. Or in this case, actually, let's pause there. I'm going to go ahead and post out some G-code, right? So that third thing is we're going to post G-code, and then I'll circle back to a second setup real quick in case you guys wanted to run two at a time, right? So what I'm going to do now is I am going to proof out this program. What does that mean? I am going to post maybe one toolpath at a time, right? We got to make sure the tool at the machine goes to the right location. Again, being new, your first time ever going into Fusion, and you're probably asking, where is my post processor? How do I get a post processor? Well, Fusion has a lot of post processors out of the box. Now, if you can't find your post, or you think you need a custom post or changes to your post, this is why it's so valuable to work with a reseller like myself. I'm here to help support you and make sure your experience inside of Fusion turns out great, whether it be initial deployment, post edits, or even custom training to your workflow. So again, we were talking about being on a Haas machine, so I'm going to go ahead and say milling, Haas, and what we're looking for here is, in this case, is BF2SS is a pretty newer style machine, is the next gen control, right? Now, you may be on a different machine, and I want to show you guys this. It may be a FANUC-based machine. So if your controller is FANUC, as you can see, there's a lot of different FANUCs. There's straight Heidenhain controls. There's Siemens. A lot here for you to go through and find your machine control. Now, a lot of these posts, like I said, are great out of the box, but sometimes there's like a 10 to 15% change that needs to happen. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, actually, this gives me a good chance. Hybrid machining, can you hear my dog barking in the background? I know there's a little bit of a delay. Go ahead and let me know. Hopefully you're still out there watching my video and haven't clicked away yet. But again, we're going to go with that Haas. We're going to go with that next gen control. I'm going to select my post. And now what I'm being prompted to do, again, put it on the cloud, guys. Don't put it in your local area, because when your computer dies or if you go home, I get bugged by this all the time. Hey, when I was at work, my post was there, or now I'm in my tree stand and I can't find my tool library. Please put it on your cloud. I can't stress that enough. But as you're now seeing here is we have name and number, as well as our file name that's pulling from our files. Outside of that is we now have our output folder. The output folder is where you're going to send G-code. If I was running this on a machine, I might put that on a thumb drive or something of that nature to be able to use. Now, going down a little further, again, we can automatically open this in our file editor so that we can take a glance at it. I'm going to turn this on. We could also create NC programs, and you're going to see these populate over on the left here under NC program. So if I ever need to go back and see what I used to do, or if you want to post out several different blocks of code and be able to grab those as need be, good scenario here, I may post out all of setup 1, all of setup 2 as a second NC program, and then a third one that includes both at the same time, right? Now, every machine is a little bit unique. You have that ability to go through your post properties over here on the left. Again, we can turn things off, turn things on. You don't need to edit a post. If you want to edit a post, go watch one of my videos. If you want to watch me edit a post, feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help you guys and teach you something new. Now, as we're running down through all of this stuff, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a few other things like home position center, as well as your safe retracts. I get this a lot when somebody, oh, you cannot hear me? Can't hear the dog. Well, that's good. He's a big dog. I'm surprised he's not up here bugging me right now. But there's actually a pretty big delay if I'm finally getting that message, or somebody might have texted old hybrid machining out there. So again, you have the ability to run through a lot of these options. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because for most of you, you don't need to change much here. These are kind of niche scenarios, or if we don't get the results we want, we can come back to this. I'm going to hit post. Of course, it's going to overwrite my file. Now, the first time all of you post process, you're going to get this window about Visual Studio Code, and you need to download and install it, right? Now, as you can see, I have posted my G-code. I have my G-code to run, and that G-code is lovely color-coded. Again, this is a recommendation to anybody of all levels, is once you install Visual Studio Code, you would have to post a second time, and it will open. Now, if it doesn't open the second time, you need to check that box, open. But I'm going to go down to the extensions area, and the extension you're looking for is the Autodesk Fusion Post utility. This is how I get my stuff all beautiful and color-coded to make it much easier to read. Again, if I point the output folder to my thumb drive, I could have posted this directly to the thumb drive. I can post this to a network if you have a network machine, or as always, you can do the good old-fashioned file save as now and go dump it into whatever area you need. Now, let's run back here real quick. As you guys can see, I posted out just the face. I have my 54 work offset. Remember, in our setup, we did work offset 1, and there's just the facing operation. Now we've ran that part. Boom, it faced off. Hopefully we probed or picked up the corner properly in our machine. And now I want to go through, and you know what? I like it. I'm going to post out both things inside of this setup. Now, I could traditionally hold the control key and highlight both things. Again, you can right-click post. You can go up here to the toolbar and hit post. I believe there's even a manufacturing shortcuts by hitting S. And if you wanted to, you could put, your post process in here. So as you're seeing me do it, anytime if you don't think you can find something or you think it was in Fusion, again, the S key is an amazing shortcut key that you can also customize, as a lot of people, I think, don't realize. So we're going to go ahead and say post process. I've just now added that to my shortcut menu. If I grab my two toolpaths, hit S, boom, post-process. Here's all my post-processor settings. All of my defaults will lock in after I post. And this time round, again, we're going to get that overwrite. And as you're going to see now, is here is release notes for good old Visual Studio Code. But here is my facing straight into my contour. Again, we're doing 54 and then 54. So like I said before we got to that third step, we need to create a setup and we need to add our toolpaths. And then from that, we're going to post-process. So again, this is a general overview, guys. I'm going to start making a lot more live content because it seems like a ton of people like this live content where you can ask questions in a real environment when you see me do something or you want me to slow things down a little bit versus the pre-recorded things that you got to manually slow down and watch 15 times, right? So we did the back side of this part. Let's flip it over and machine the front side. I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new setup, and I'm basically rinse and repeat, right? So this time, I'm going to go ahead and define my Z and my X again. And as you can see, my Z is already the right direction, but I'm actually going to manually override that by picking a face, maybe an edge as you're seeing for my X-axis, because you can do faces and edges. I could work off of actually cylinder faces as well. Now, going down a little further, I want to work not off a stock box point. We're going to work off a model box point. Now, little trick that I used to do is if I'm going to flip parts over, I like to go off the machined bottom. This always confuses people at first because my G code is no longer at 0 working in a negative. My G code's going to be a positive working towards a negative. But as you can see, if I had a machine stop and some soft jaws, slid right back there on that corner, my stock now is going to be from my preceding setup. What does that mean? We've already machined one side, and now we flipped it over. Instead of doing the old school export an STL, bring in an STL, as I've heard people are still doing, we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually allow continuous rest machining to do all the work for us. I'm also going to recommend that by checking this box, you click these 3 little dots and you save as a user default. Anything you find yourself changing constantly that you think by default should be checked, unchecked, a certain dimension, by all means, guys, change it and go ahead and hit those 3 little dots next to what it is and get it set up. Now, on the post-process side, we're going to go with work offset 2. I'm also going to label this 1002 because it is going to be set up to. And as you're seeing me start to do, I'm starting to add more information little by little, right? Little changes make things big happen inside of Fusion. And if you make too many changes, then you can't remember or you've built those muscle memory habits and it's very hard to troubleshoot. Then you got to deal with old Fusion Phil over here telling you, man, I just hit OK and the toolpath worked. I don't know what's wrong with it, right? So for cheating purposes, I'm going to go ahead and copy this toolpath. I'm going to go down here to the bottom and I'm going to paste that in. Now, I am going to regenerate this toolpath. So again, I used Windows hotkey, Control-C, Control-V, as in Victor. We're going to go ahead and regenerate. So we could have actually did Control-G, or if you're like me and we want to add that to our good old fancy shortcut menu. Now, at any time I have that ability to, again, use that shortcut menu to your advantage, pin whatever you guys feel necessary to your workflow. But what you're seeing is we're now facing off the back side. And like I said, I wanted to show you guys the continuous rest machining here. So I went ahead and hit F8. And as you're seeing with continuous rest machining, we're coming in and we're decking off the back side. But if you notice the stock model, it's still continuing from the last go around. So as you're seeing this is we're going in and we're setting up everything and we're machining the front side. I'm now machining that back side. I'm using a different work offset for my second setup. So if I was to go through and post out both of these items, I'm actually, I'm terrible at using the shortcut menu, and I'm now realizing in my brain all these years I've wasted of button clicks here, there, and everywhere. But we're going to go ahead and post-process. Again, we're going to just leave everything pretty straightforward. I'm going to get a warning just letting me know, hey, buddy, you're using 2 work offsets, right? Make sure you're not going to crash. We want to make sure you're aware. Now, what I'm going to do is overwrite that file again. We're going to pop out that G code. Again, first setup 54, our then contours 54, and then when we roll down here into our next face, you're actually going to notice that we have that 55, right? So now we've done 2 setups on 2 separate work offsets. Again, run 2 vices in your machine. Maybe you got to make 50 parts. I did just see a question come in, and let's go ahead and read this one live. how will stock material work if you're machining from a round stock? Location, the model in the center of the round stock, maybe for a later video. No, that's not good. Actually, I'm more than happy to answer that right here. And I'm going to do so because we're kind of wrapping up the milling side. Again, those 3 pointers work for both milling and turning. And I wanted to give you guys a good turning example. So again, I'm going to go back to the default projects of good old Fusion 360, not default projects, the cam samples, and we are going to find us a round part. Now, I'm going to pull in a kind of almost like a larger round part. It's not going to matter because all of this stuff is going to work the same. Now, you guys are going to see me delete everything here because I like to start from scratch. No offense to Autodesk in this part and how it was programmed. Some of us probably wouldn't do that part anyways, but it's good habit and it's good for you to have a reference, which is a great way to look at those and keep them. So now on that round part, as I'm seeing from Deep Thinker, I'm going to create a setup. As you're going to notice is Fusion is now automatically saying turning or mill turn. And the reason why that is because I'm currently sitting in the turning area, right? Oh, so you're referring for milling from round stock. Same concept. Let me run through the turning here real quick, and I will show you that as well. So again, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the milling tab. I'm then inside of the operations area, go to turning. And as you can see, I now have a round piece of stock. So again, with my XYZ coordinates, if I go to the stock side of everything, we're working with a fixed size cylinder. And as you're going to see here, there, Deep Thinker, it's the same thing in milling, is if I say offset from front in this case, I can offset that whatever I need. Now, I do know that this is showing you guys everything in millimeters, and I am the worst at measuring in millimeters because I'm used to the inch system, but I can offset that model from the face of this part. And then again, we go into our tooling. From there, we're going to do any of our actual lathe turning tool paths. Then we can actually jump to milling if you're mill turn, and then chasing everything down with the fancy S key, because I like this way better now, and I'm really hating myself inside on the value of being able to post-process or generate right here from one menu versus hunt it down on my toolbar. Now let's pivot back real quick. So Deep Thinker, as you're asking here, is if I was doing this based on a setup for milling, and then my stock was round, what you notice is it's identical to what I've done so far, right? So now, as I set this part up, I can still base things on a stock box point. Now, it might be a little unrealistic to use like a back left corner. Again, that's the outermost corner on those 2 edges. But I could also go in and I could put this, on center. I could put this on center at the bottom. If I wanted to actually create a selected point for my work offset is, let's say I want to actually use this 12 o'clock position up front. Ignore the stock. We're just setting our work offset because on the stock side of things, I can go in and I can actually select my axis. And what that allows me to do is to pick where I want that center of rotation to come from. Ah, I see what you're saying. So if you're running out like a tube or like a 48-inch tube or something like that, right? So looks like his question is more running out of a long bar. So are you referring to a long bar as in you want to do multiple parts, or you just want to put like a keyway slot down a shaft and that shaft is longer than your machine travel? Give you a second here to answer. In the meantime, I got to tell you guys, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. Obviously, it helps this channel. If you're also looking to help this channel in any way, we actually had somebody yesterday go by the name of Tony. I'm not going to say his last name. He actually used the link down below to buy me a beer. But with that, Deep Thinker, if you're still there, I assume... Okay, so you're a 40-inch part made from... Okay, so if you were, and I'm going to do this here, is we're just going to create our part. And I'm going to do this relatively quick. And you said roughly 40 inches long. Let's just go ahead and say this is 2-inch. Now you guys get to see how fast I do things here. And for the sake of this, let's go ahead and throw a keyway slot. And we're going to take that through all. There we go. And... oh, that was you that bought me the beer. Even better, man. Now you're getting your $3 worth. See, the value of just donating $3 goes a long way. So here I have a part 40 inches long. If I was to go into the manufacturer side, and I'm going to run you through both scenarios, right? So let's say, for example, once again, I'm a fixed size cylinder. I can select my axis. As you can see, there's my stock wrapped around that. If I was going to run this based off a simple location, I could go off, back left corner, center of that actual part. Utilizing maybe the hard jaws or the non-moving jaws on the back of my part, I can pick up that same location. Now, if I was going to take this a little bit further and I hang it outside of my machine and do something in different areas, I have a really good video on boundaries and how to use boundaries to your advantage. Well, the way I can do that here is, again, in the design workspace, I could create a sketch, and then I like to make, kind of those two boundaries and how they might overlap to generate the two working areas, right? I'm going to slide this part down, machine the left side, then machine the right side. Maybe you're going to add like a witness mark or a datum somewhere in that shift. Now, I hope that kind of answers your question. It's always great to get these questions at the end because I feel like this is the content that everybody wants. They don't want to sit here and be bored to death by everything I've shown there. But again, as you guys have seen, in the world of Fusion, when it comes to cam, it is simple. And me being an ex-Mastercam user, I shouldn't say ex, I still use it from day to day. But that said, it is a different thought process. It is much harder to unlearn all those old habits when you're used to 30 or 40 mouse clicks to get something done versus 1 to 2 mouse clicks and go back and fix it, right? It's more important to get those paths on your part, then modify those paths from there. Now, before I go ahead and shut this down, I want to thank all of you guys for coming out and checking out yet again another one of my live streams. If you guys love content like this, as I said, go ahead and leave a comment down below, subscribe, share these videos with everybody. Let's get that algorithm going so that we can get more content, more actual issues that our people are having, as well how we can get those solutions in place to get them fixed. As always, you guys have a great rest of your night.